So, welcome to the first episode of the SONLIT Missions CoffeeCast.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us. And we wanted to spend a little time talking about what is the CoffeeCast, what is SONLIT Missions, and a little bit about what we kind of see this being or how it comes out. So why don't we talk a little bit, tell us, as you see it, kind of the vision of SONLIT, how this came about, just the quick and dirty story of how this all happened.
You mean SONLIT or you mean the
SONLIT,
CoffeeCast?
No, SONLIT in general.
Oh, okay. Wow. The whole concept came in for SONLIT. And by the way, just for those of you who are looking for us on the web out there, it's S-O-N, as in the Son of God, L-I-T.
Right.
One word, SONLIT. So I was thinking about that today. Anyway, so that concept came, after a mission trip, and actually during a mission trip to Guatemala a few years back. And it just kind of woke me up in the middle of the night that the missionaries that we meet are just, their output is far greater than their incoming. As far as heart renewal is concerned, and that's what we call it now. But it's just the Spirit helping fill them up with fellow believers and stuff like that. And so, and they're very thankful when some of us go down and they get to hang out with folks that they're not serving, basically.
Right.
And so that's where it all started, and now it's kind of morphed. The name came, a few months later. I couldn't shake it, the concept of doing this, because it required a tremendous amount of. If I'm really going to answer this call, then it requires, some commitment on my end, and that commitment would be ramping my business down, having a lot more margin in my life, being a lot more open to. God speaking into it, and so that took me a while to digest. But the way God works is really awesome, because He just kind of gave that to me in my speed, which is about a 3-year gig.
Yeah.
And the beauty in it, I had this friend that would just constantly encourage me to dig into it, and he happens to be sitting right here. That was awesome, and so now here we are, and we're co-founders of this concept of SONLIT Missions. It did hit us both that SONLIT needed to be a heart renewal, not just for missionaries, but for everybody, and that kind of opened up, made the lens a lot wider. So now. What's heart renewal? Well, heart renewal is just that that daily walk that we try to get closer to Christ, and there are certain things that inspire us, certain teachings that we learn, certain scriptures that all of a sudden mean something new to us, and different people, that are in your life just for a season, but they're there for a reason. Especially spiritual folks, and they have something God has something for them to teach you, before you move on to the next person. So that's kind of the concept of SONLIT. And so we capture all these interviews. We started with a couple interviews of friends, and the idea now is to take some of the things that they say during those long interviews and put them into bite-sized pieces, male and female, old and young, all sorts of different famous, not famous, all these folks that really have a heart for some other people. They have a heart for others before themselves, and I think that's what's really rewarding is we get to foster those conversations and become a sort of a media missionary in being able to be really focused on discipleship making. And what's discipleship making? Because a lot of people have an issue with that. So what does that mean to you?
Well, it's about a constant training, if you will, almost, of not only being a follower, but trying to build other followers. Yeah. That's really what it's all about. And I think we've seen this sort of exampled through a lot of people that we know. Mm-hmm. And we've watched kind of how even those lifelong disciple makers, how they've continued to grow. And I think the thing that hit me was we would do these, we started out doing sort of this long form capture with someone. And what you saw within that was, wow, these people have like life experiences and things that have happened to them that are totally applicable to not just people in their generation, but to people in way younger generations, that they could take that wisdom and learn from it. And it's something that for some of them, it took them in some instances 80 years to figure out, or whatever the age was. But also some people pick it up, different items in their lives at much younger, different generations. And so that idea of discipleship is a lifelong journey. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just start at a certain age or at a certain point in your life, and it ebbs and flows, I think, for the average individual. Not saying that it can't be consistent or can't be a steady journey, but for a lot of people, it comes and goes. And I think when I think about content that we want to try to help deliver to people, it's to try to meet you at whatever that point is in your journey. Right. And we don't know where that's at, and maybe you don't know where it's at either. The point
I'm not sure I know where mine is at.
Right, yeah. And so that's kind of the whole...
I know somebody that does know where it's at.
Yeah, it's kind of the whole point, is that no matter where you're at in the journey, potentially there's someone else's experience that you can relate to, and maybe it'll somehow impact or make a difference for you. And I know those guys and people that we have interviewed so far have had stories or things that they've shared that have made a small difference in my own personal walk. And I know if it probably makes a difference to me, or if it makes a difference to you, there's bound to be other people out there that would make a difference to you too. So the idea was to try to capture some of this content and have it as a legacy to be able to pass on for generation to generation for whatever point people are at in their walk. And it really is timeless in the truest sense, that the things that they learn, they apply to everybody at some point in their life, probably. So.
Right. Yeah, I think, the fact that the word becomes alive to certain people, and you can walk with Christ, but you can't walk as Christ. Maybe that's not the best way to say it. Maybe the way to say it is, some folks know Christ, and but their heart isn't full of it. So we all have a season or a life that has a life with Christ in it, and then we have a life with Christ not in it. And we all strive for the life with Christ in it. It makes for a lot more patient, less anxiety, less fearful, more joyful, all the fruits of the Spirit, peace and gentle and kindness, loving type of life. And you think less about yourself and more about others, and just life's a lot calmer when you live with Christ in your heart. Yep. So that's kind of our foundational principle. Is the heart is where everything starts.
And the logo really reflects that. I mean, when you look at the logo, you'll see the colors, and we can get into some details on that sometime. But really, it's about the heart trying to come closer to the cross. Constantly the battle of being sort of torn away from the cross, but sort of trying to come back to the cross. And I think we can spend some time really getting into that sometime, more about the logo itself, but let everybody kind of look at that and think about that before we get deep into that sometime. But I want to talk briefly just about the CoffeeCast idea in general. And this is something that while we certainly wanted to do and will be doing more production style content, we wanted to have something too that I think was free form and more real, and less polished, but was able to just communicate with people. And so as you're listening to this as a podcast, or maybe you're watching it on a YouTube subscription or through whatever your social media delivery of preference of choice is, know that these are real conversations that are maybe less edited, less polished, but they're real conversations. And I think there's a lot of value to that. And I think also you'll see more polished, or maybe even cuts from within these that we want to highlight, because maybe there was one of those bite-sized pieces that we talk about that will come out that we want to really highlight or emphasize or use as a teaching moment maybe in the future. So while this episode is Trent and I just sort of, talking, we will have other folks who will jump in here into the different seats, and they'll be sharing their stories, and they'll be real. And that's one of the things we want to be authentic, I think is a word that kind of keeps coming up when we talk about this, is we want to be authentic about the journey, that it's not about perfection. Right? It's about just continuously being real and authentic about what the journey really is.
One of my favorite quotes is, worry looks back, sorry looks around, and faith looks up. And we'd all like to live that life where we're not pointing a finger at somebody else when we're looking around, or so burdened by our past and unable to let it go and make peace with it that we just can't live a life of looking up. And everybody that's going to be sitting in this CoffeeCast struggles with that on a day-to-day basis. They'll be here primarily because they do a pretty good job of looking up, or at least they're authentic and transparent with their life spikes, the things that have happened in their life. To be able to talk about those freely and share what it was like. I mean, how burdensome it was with whatever those things might be. That kind of, whatever life spike, whether it's addiction or whatever it might be, divorce, death. There's so many of them. And these life spikes people are going to share, and you're going to identify, and I know I do. I identify with multiples of those. And as a matter of fact, my story, you'll identify with. Some of you will, and some of them will think, oh my gosh, I'm sure glad I don't live his life. Right. So I'm excited just to have this kind of, so here's the format. If you're watching this, we're just sitting in a little coffee shop here, just like you would with your friend. Right. Now, what is this really example? Well, we're not that creative. So what this really examples is 25 years in my life of doing this very thing. Once a week, sitting down with a group of 4 men and being accountable to what the Word is speaking to us, sharing what kind of junk is going on in our life, and realizing that it'll stay at the table. It isn't going to be spread out on a billboard across town or on the front page. And just being able to be vulnerable with how life is treating you right now. Okay. Most men don't do that in particular, and I've been doing that for 25 years, and I was terrible at it when we began, and I'm not so sure I'm good at it now. But the point is it's extremely helpful, and that has brought that kind of accountability and that kind of a coffee shop type of straight talking mentality has brought me through addiction from a son, the long-term death of a wife, the closing of a business. It's just amazing the different life spikes that I've been through that wouldn't have been, oh my gosh, it would have been extremely difficult to feel like I was the only one going through that and not have 3 or 4 accountable friends that I met with on a weekly basis. And we keep it God-centered, but at the same time, sometimes life gets pretty difficult. So I really, in some of those cases, I really put the hurt on some of my friends. So.
Well, I think it's just about walking alongside other people who can share, in ways to try to encourage you or help you through life as a whole. And having people that you can do that with is important. Hopefully, if you don't have that in your life, maybe we can help fill that a little bit through this. And I really want us to think about the fact that we're having hopefully we're sharing something that's a one-on-one conversation with you as a viewer or you as a listener, and that also you'll feel comfortable in sharing back if you have questions, comments, or a prayer request or whatever it is. Hopefully you'll share with us, whether that be you want to put a comment or you want to leave some feedback or whether you just want to contact someone directly. So if you feel like you need that, we're going to begin to share some of that information where you can send in a prayer request or things like that, where people can kind of be following along. So hopefully you feel like it's a little bit of a journey with you as well as with us. And
Yeah, it's a great way to say it. I like since this media missionary thing kind of came to us, and that is actually a phrase, and there are other entities, but to come alongside ministry is exactly what this coffee shop concept is all about.
right.
And, we were both out in rural Wyoming a couple summers ago when my oldest son got married. And I was thinking about the cowboys that are on the range, open range out there. Mm. Now, they have a cell phone, and they got a horse, and that's it. Yep. They're not going to be able to meet for coffee every day. Those guys could follow along here, and maybe just feel like they have some connectivity.
Right.
But that could happen in Nicaragua. That could happen in South Africa. That could happen in Poland.
And sometimes it happens in the corporate office building on the 12th floor too.
Yeah.
Where you feel totally alone. And the only connection you have is a phone or a computer, and you just feel disconnected. And we've all probably experienced those times in the corporate world too. So hopefully this lends a little bit of connectivity. Maybe you feel inspired or encouraged by something you've seen, or maybe you just have some questions, and hopefully we'll have some content that'll maybe answer those, or maybe you'll submit a question and it'll make us think too. It'll give us an opportunity to share kind of just some thoughts on the fly.
And not only that, or maybe we can flush it out with we are very fortunate to be surrounded by people a lot smarter than us.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And a lot more down the path. And that question that you put forth is not your only. It's not only a question of yours. If you put it forth, I can assure you there are hundreds, if not thousands, of others wanting the same thing. And if we can't flush it out and give you some action steps, then we know who we can talk to.
You bet.
That'd be kind of cool content in the future.
Anyway, I think that the important part is that we're getting started.
Yeah,
that's the important part.
This is number one.
This is our first CoffeeCast, and we wanted to put something together. It was just the two of us having a little bit of a conversation about what this format is, who we are, and what we're doing. And we want to encourage you to follow along. We're on most of the socials out there: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, obviously. This podcast will be distributed through a lot of those mediums and also through Anchor FM, which will get this hooked up through Apple, Google, Spotify, and all the major podcast players that are out there. There's usually about 8. And as those become available, we'll certainly be putting those in the comments below. We just want to encourage you to subscribe and follow along. Think about joining the journey, because this is one of many that will come. We don't really know the frequency, but we're trying to create content regularly. That's our idea. And hopefully you will all join along with it.
Right.
So thanks for watching or listening. Again, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next CoffeeCast.
Can't wait to talk to you again.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you listen to us again.
That's right.
That'd be awesome.
Thanks for joining. See ya.
Cheers.